You are 60 feet underground, inside a steel capsule built to survive a nuclear war. Your only job is simple. Do not let the missiles go dark. On the morning of March 16, 1967, that is exactly what happened. 12 guards, spread across miles of frozen Montana grassland, radioed in the same impossible report within minutes of each other. None of them had spoken to one another. None of them could even see each other's posts from where they stood. They all described a glowing red object, hovering low and silent over America's most secretive nuclear launch site. Seconds later, 10 fully armed intercontinental ballistic missiles dropped offline, all at once, with no warning and no order from anyone inside the launch capsules. So how do 12 strangers describe the exact same object, in the exact same words, at the exact same moment their missiles went dark? But before I tell you what happened underground that night, I need to know something first. Before we go deeper, tell me where you are watching from. Drop your city below. I read everyone. Today's goal is just 50 likes, that's it. If we hit that, it tells me to go even deeper next time. And if you like true documented military mysteries, hit subscribe. We go deep on this channel. Now let's go back to the base where this began. It is 1967. The Cold War is at its coldest. Malmstrom Air Force Base sits outside Great Falls, Montana, a stretch of frozen prairie built for one purpose only. Underground, spread across hundreds of square miles, sit the silos of the 341st Strategic Missile Wing. Each silo holds a Minuteman I intercontinental ballistic missile, fully armed, fully fueled, and pointed at targets inside the Soviet Union. This is not a training exercise. These missiles are real. They are part of America's nuclear deterrent, the backbone of a strategy known as mutually assured destruction. If the missiles fail, the entire strategy fails with them, and the balance of the Cold War tips in a direction no one in Washington wants to imagine. The men who guard these silos work in near total isolation. Above ground, security alert teams and flight security controllers patrol frozen fence lines in complete darkness, miles from the nearest town, miles from each other. Below ground, missile combat crews sit inside hardened launch capsules, sealed behind blast doors, waiting for an order they hope never comes. There is no civilian traffic out here. There is no scheduled air traffic either. There is no reason for anything or anyone to be in this airspace. Anything that enters it is treated by protocol as an immediate and potentially lethal threat. The launch facilities are organized into flights, each one a cluster of 10 missile silos controlled from a single underground capsule miles away. Oscar Flight is one of these clusters. Echo Flight is another, positioned separately, its guards and officers with no direct line of communication to Oscars. This detail matters. It means that whatever happens at one flight cannot easily be explained by contamination from the other. They are, for all practical purposes, isolated experiments running in parallel, without either side knowing what the other is experiencing. Try to picture it for a moment. Negative degrees outside. A rifle so cold it sticks to your gloves through the fabric. You are told to guard a launch site with no name on any public map, against an enemy that intelligence reports say could come from anywhere, at any hour, without warning. That is the world these men lived in, every single night, guarding a war that officially had never even started. The Minuteman I program itself was still relatively new in 1967. The missiles had only become fully operational a few years earlier, and the entire guidance and control architecture was considered, at the time, to be among the most advanced electronic systems the United States had ever fielded. Engineers at Boeing, the prime contractor responsible for the guidance systems, had built in layers of redundancy specifically because a single point of failure in a nuclear deterrent was considered strategically unacceptable. That redundancy is what makes what happened in March of 1967 so difficult to explain away as routine. Security protocol at facilities like Oscar Flight and Echo Flight was rigid by design. Guards did not radio in unusual sightings casually. A false alarm near a nuclear launch site could trigger an alert that pulled resources from across the base, and repeated false alarms could end a career. Every man on that fence line in March of 1967 understood exactly what was at stake if he called in something that was not real, which is part of why what happened that month stands out so sharply in the official record. But it was not the Soviets these guards feared most that March. His name is Captain Robert Salas. In March of 1967, he serves as the Deputy Missile Combat Crew Commander for Oscar Flight, one of the underground launch control centers at Malmstrom. He has been in the Air Force for years by this point. He is not, by his own account, the kind of officer who scares easily, and by his own later description, he did not believe in anything strange or unexplainable when this assignment began. He was trained to trust procedure, trained to trust instruments, and trained to distrust anything that could not be explained by either. According to Salas, on the night of March 24, 1967, his topside flight security controller called down to the capsule on a secure line. The guard reported unusual lights in the sky, moving in ways Salas has said no conventional aircraft should move, no steady heading, no blinking navigation lights, no engine sound carrying across the frozen field. Salas did not take the initial call seriously. He told the guard to keep watching and to report back if anything changed. Stop for a second. This next detail is the one that changed everything for Salas and for everyone on duty that night. 5 minutes later, the same guard called back. This time, according to Salas, the man's voice was different, edged with something close to panic. He said a glowing, silent, red, oval-shaped object was hovering directly outside the front gate of the launch facility, low enough that its shape and color were unmistakable even in the dark. Salas has said publicly, in later interviews and in testimony given decades afterward, that as the guard was speaking, the alarms inside the underground capsule began to sound. Not a scheduled drill, not a routine test, a real klaxon blaring inside a sealed nuclear launch capsule 60 feet beneath the Montana prairie. One by one, the missile status lights on the console in front of him began switching from green, meaning strategic alert and ready to fire, to red, meaning no-go. The missiles under his direct command were shutting themselves down, on their own, with no command entered by anyone inside the capsule, and no external signal that instruments could identify. He picked up the phone to alert his commanding officer, Colonel Frederick Mywald, who was also on duty in the capsule that night. According to Salas, Mywald was just as stunned by what the console was showing. Neither man had a procedure written for this. There was no training manual, no checklist, no simulation drill that accounted for missiles failing themselves in sequence, while a guard above ground reported a glowing object parked over the front gate. Salas has described the minutes that followed as some of the longest of his career. 10 missiles, an entire flight's worth of America's nuclear deterrent, sat unlaunchable on the console in front of him, and neither he nor Mywald could explain why, or predict whether the failure would spread further, or whether the object above ground had anything to do with it at all. All they had, in that moment, was a guard's voice on the line, describing something that should not have been there. In the minutes that followed, standard procedure called for a full damage and status assessment, a process that normally took a fraction of the time it took that night. Every checklist Salas had trained on assumed a cause: a power failure, a wiring fault, a maintenance error somewhere upstream. None of the checklists assumed all 10 causes failing at once for no traceable reason, while a security guard topside was still on the line describing a red light that had not moved from the front gate. But that was not the strangest part of what happened that week. Pause for 1 second. What do you think this actually was? A technical glitch that has never been fully explained. A Soviet weapons test, for something we do not have a name for. Comment your answer below. Let's see what the records actually say. It is 0300 hours. The Montana prairie is absolute silence, the kind of silence that presses against your ears after enough minutes pass. Above ground, a member of the security alert team walks the fence line near one of the remote launch facilities. His breath fogs in the freezing air. His rifle is slung low against his chest. Then he sees it, a dull red glow low on the horizon, growing brighter as it moves closer. Without haste, without hesitation. It does not blink like an aircraft on approach. It does not roar like a jet engine cutting through cold air. It makes no sound at all. It simply hangs there, low over the perimeter fence, closer than anything with wings should ever be permitted to fly, closer than any aircraft has ever been authorized to come to a nuclear launch site. The guard freezes in place. His training tells him to radio it in immediately. His body will not obey for several full seconds. Stop. That single word is what several guards later said ran through their minds in that exact moment, before they could even force themselves to speak into the radio. He finally keys his handset. His voice cracks slightly as he reports the object, describing its color, its shape, its silence. Within minutes, guards at other remote sites, men who cannot see this particular location and who have had no radio contact with this specific guard, begin independently reporting the same thing. A glowing red saucer-shaped object. Silent, hovering low, not retreating, not advancing, simply present. You need to understand something about these men before you judge how strange this sounds. They were trained security personnel, selected in part for their composure under pressure, guarding the single most sensitive category of weapon in the entire American arsenal. Panic was not tolerated in this job. Exaggeration was not tolerated either. These were not men prone to embellishing a routine patrol report, because a false or dramatized report could trigger a full base-wide security response, and every one of them knew it. Below ground, inside the launch capsule, Captain Salas and Colonel Maywald watch as, one by one, all 10 Minuteman missiles under their command drop from strategic alert to no-go status. Each missile sits on its own independent power grid. Each one has redundant control and guidance systems, engineered specifically to prevent this exact kind of cascading, sympathetic failure from ever happening. Losing a single missile to a technical fault is plausible, even expected occasionally. Losing all 10, simultaneously, across systems that were deliberately isolated from one another, is something else entirely, and everyone in that capsule knows it in the moment it is happening. Lieutenant Robert Jameson, the combat targeting team commander on duty that shift, is brought into the situation to help assess the scale of the failure. The lights on the console do not lie, and they do not offer an explanation either. 10 missiles, an entire flight of America's nuclear deterrent, sit unlaunchable at exactly the moment the guards above ground are describing an object hovering over the gate. If the Soviet Union had launched a first strike at that precise window, those 10 missiles could not have fired back, and everyone in that capsule understood the strategic weight of that fact immediately. Above ground, the object holds its position for several minutes before the guards say it simply moves off, without sound, without visible exhaust, without any conventional means of propulsion that anyone present could identify. No one fires a weapon at it, under strict standing orders not to engage an unidentified object near a nuclear site without direct authorization. No official record explains where it went, or what, if anything, tracked it after it left the airspace above the fence line. In the after-action conversations that followed, several of the guards compared notes on one detail in particular. The object had cast no shadow, thrown no light onto the surrounding snow the way a spotlight or a flare would have. It seemed to glow from within itself, a detail none of them had a framework to explain, and none of them had seen before, or would see again in the rest of their careers. They filed a report that night. But Oscar Flight was not the only launch site that had already seen this happen. 1 week earlier, on March 16, 1967, the exact same pattern occurred at Echo Flight, a separate set of Malmstrom launch facilities located miles away from Oscar Flight, with an entirely different set of guards and officers on duty. Guards at Echo Flight reported similar unidentified lights moving through the area that night. Shortly after those reports came in, all 10 of the Minuteman missiles under Echo Flight's control also dropped offline, within seconds of each other, in a pattern almost identical to what would happen at Oscar Flight a week later. Declassified Strategic Air Command maintenance logs confirm this timeline in writing. A telex sent to SAC headquarters at the time confirms the sudden and simultaneous loss of strategic capability across both flights. This is not folklore passed down informally over decades. This is a documented military communication, filed the same week the missiles failed, sitting today in declassified archives available for anyone to review. 2 separate incidents, 1 week apart. 2 different flights, miles apart, with guards who had never met, spoken to, or even heard of one another before that month. So how do you explain that? The pattern does not stop with the guards on the fence line. Robert Kaminsky, a Boeing engineering team leader, was assigned to investigate the shutdown afterward, because Boeing built and maintained the guidance and control systems used across the entire Minuteman program. According to Kaminsky's own later statements, his engineering team could not identify a conventional explanation for how 10 independently wired, independently powered launch systems could fail at the exact same instant on 2 separate occasions 1 week apart. He has said publicly that his team was explicitly instructed by the military to stop investigating any possible connection to the unidentified object reports coming in from the guards. The official Air Force explanation recorded in the declassified summary documents released decades later, attributes the failures to a noise pulse, or in some versions of the record, a faulty resistor somewhere in the guidance electronics. The declassified summary reports make no mention whatsoever of the objects the guards described that night. Those specific accounts, the ones told in first person, by trained security personnel, were left entirely out of the official written record that the public would eventually see. But the guards' accounts were not left out of the interrogation that followed the incident. According to Salas, within hours of the Oscar flight shutdown, investigators connected to Project Blue Book and Strategic Air Command arrived at Malmstrom to review the incident directly. Salas and Mywald were separated from one another and questioned individually, a standard technique for testing whether independent accounts still line up under isolated questioning. Salas has said publicly, on more than one occasion, that he and other officers involved were instructed afterward to sign non-disclosure agreements and told plainly not to discuss what they had witnessed with anyone, including their own wives and families. Beyond Salas, Mywald and Jameson, roughly a dozen enlisted topside security guards across both flights independently filed reports describing the same object in the same general terms, a detail that later surfaced in Air Force records and in interviews conducted long after the men had left active duty. None of these guards held officer rank. None of them had any strategic reason to coordinate a story, and several of them, according to later accounts, were reluctant to even discuss what they had seen, worried it would affect how their superiors viewed their judgment. What makes the Echo Flight and Oscar Flight incidents especially difficult to dismiss as coincidence is the specificity of the object described. Not a vague light on the horizon. Not a distant aircraft that could be mistaken for something else. A glowing, red, saucer-shaped object, low altitude, silent, stationary for several minutes at a time, directly over or near the perimeter of a nuclear launch facility. Two separate groups of men, one week and several miles apart, converged on that same description independently, before ever comparing notes with one another. Investigators arrived with an explanation already prepared, but it did not survive contact with the engineers who tried to prove it in a lab. There are 4 explanations that have circulated in the decades since 1967. None of them are officially confirmed by any government agency. All 4 deserve honest, unemotional consideration before you decide what you believe. Theory 1 is straightforward equipment malfunction. Cold War-era guidance electronics were sensitive by modern standards, and a shared design flaw somewhere across the Minuteman fleet is not impossible on its face. Complex electronic systems fail in unexpected ways, especially in extreme cold. But this theory runs directly into one specific detail that is difficult to get past. The systems were deliberately engineered on separate, redundant power grids for the specific purpose of preventing one localized failure from spreading into the next. A shared design flaw does not easily explain a truly simultaneous failure across systems that were built, on purpose, not to fail together. Theory 2 is a conventional electromagnetic pulse, the kind of pulse produced by a nuclear detonation, a powerful directed energy weapon, or certain kinds of severe solar activity. An electromagnetic pulse is the only conventional physical force known to be capable of disabling multiple separate electronic systems simultaneously across a wide area. But there was no detonation recorded that night, no blast of any kind, and critically, no disruption to the base's other electrical systems, lighting, or communications equipment, all of which continued functioning normally throughout the entire incident on both occasions. There is one more detail here that has unsettled the engineers who actually worked this case more than any other. Boeing's own engineering team, led by Kaminsky, spent months afterward attempting to replicate the failure inside a controlled laboratory environment, using the same guidance hardware. According to Kaminsky's own account, his team could not reproduce the shutdown pattern without direct, physical interference with the hardware itself. In other words, whatever caused the missiles to fail that night could not be recreated by any conventional method his own engineers tried. Theory 3 is a Soviet weapons test, something the American military reportedly took seriously at the time, given how strategically valuable it would have been for Moscow to demonstrate the ability to disable American nuclear capability without ever firing a shot or crossing a border. but no Soviet technology from that specific era has ever been shown capable of remotely disabling hardened, shielded American missile systems from an external distance, and nothing resembling this capability has surfaced in any of the decades since. Even after the Cold War ended and enormous volumes of records were declassified on both sides of the former Iron Curtain, Theory 4 is the one that senior officers themselves, including men who spent entire careers around nuclear command systems, have found hardest to dismiss outright. If an unidentified craft can hover directly over one of America's most secure nuclear weapons sites and switch off 10 missiles without firing a single shot, without triggering an alarm the base could actually respond to in time, the uncomfortable question is not only what that object was, it is what it could have done instead of switching the missiles off. It could, theoretically, have turned them on. None of these four explanations fully accounts for guards at two separate locations, 1 week apart, with no contact between them, independently describing the same object in the same terms, followed almost immediately in both cases by a simultaneous and still officially unexplained failure of 10 hardened redundant nuclear missile systems. It is worth being precise about what is actually established here and what is not. What is established, through declassified SAC logs and a wartime-era telex, is that 10 missiles at Echo Flight and 10 missiles at Oscar Flight went offline simultaneously, on 2 separate dates, and that this happened on systems specifically engineered to make simultaneous failure extraordinarily unlikely. What is not established, at least not by any government agency on the record, is what the guards actually saw, or whether it had any physical connection to the failures at all. The honest answer, even now, is that nobody official has ever closed that gap. Stay with me, because the account that came years later, from a decorated officer who eventually spoke on the record under his own name, is unlike anything we have covered so far. If you have made it this far, thank you, genuinely. Hit that like button right now if this has you thinking. For years, Captain Robert Salas said nothing. The non-disclosure agreement he says he was made to sign kept him silent, even from his own family, for the better part of 3 decades. He was not an anonymous internet account. He was not a fringe figure seeking attention or invention. He was a decorated United States Air Force officer with a documented service record, and he carried this account quietly through most of his career, the way he had been instructed to. That changed later in his life, when Salas began speaking publicly about what he personally experienced at Oscar Flight in March of 1967. He has since testified before members of the United States Congress. He has appeared publicly at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., alongside other former nuclear launch officers who independently say they witnessed similar incidents at other American missile bases during the same general period. Each of these officers, without coordinating their accounts beforehand, describes some version of the exact same pattern. An unidentified object appears near a nuclear weapons facility. Shortly afterward, missile systems fail in ways that have never been fully explained by conventional means. This is the detail that connects directly back to where we started tonight. The glowing object 12 guards independently described over Oscar and Echo Flight in March of 1967 was never officially identified. It was never officially investigated by name as anything other than a noise pulse or an electronics fault. And to this day, no government agency has offered the public a reproducible, scientifically verified explanation for how 10 independently wired nuclear missiles failed at the exact same moment guards say that object was present overhead. Salas has said, in later interviews and in his own written accounts, that he does not personally know what the object was. He has been careful, publicly and repeatedly, not to claim more certainty than what he personally witnessed and can stand behind. What he insists on, consistently, across every interview and every appearance, is that the missiles going offline and the object appearing were not a coincidence. In his professional judgment as the officer on duty, he was there. He watched the status lights change in real time. He heard the klaxon, and no official report he has ever seen has fully explained why it happened. The declassified maintenance logs end where they always end, a list of times, a list of missile numbers, a brief note stating that the affected systems were repaired over the following weeks. Nothing about a red light hovering over the front gate. Nothing about 12 guards, spread across 2 separate flights, who had never spoken to one another, describing the same substantive object, in the same specific terms, in the same impossible window of time. The official record closes the case on paper. The men who were actually there never have. These were trained observers, not casual witnesses. Security personnel selected, in part, specifically for their ability to stay calm and precise under extreme pressure. Missile combat officers entrusted with operational control over some of the most destructive weapons ever built by any nation. These are not the kind of witnesses skeptics usually picture when they imagine someone describing an unidentified object in the sky. So ask yourself the question that Salas himself has spent decades trying to put in front of the public, in congressional hearings and press conferences held long after the non-disclosure agreement he says he signed should have kept him silent forever. If something can reach across concrete, shielding, and deliberately redundant power grids, and switch off 10 of America's most closely guarded nuclear weapons without ever firing a single shot, what does that actually tell us about how much control we believe we have, and how much control we truly do? The guards who stood watch that march never spoke of it in daylight, not for years, not to their own commanding officers beyond the initial report, and in some cases, not even to their own families. Only decades later, at a press conference in Washington, D.C., did several of them finally say the words out loud, on the record, under their own names, in front of cameras. Skeptics are right to ask hard questions here, and a fair telling of this story has to leave room for them. Memory is imperfect, even for trained observers. Stress and cold and a long shift can shape perception in ways people do not always notice in the moment. Some researchers who have reviewed the case argue that a rare, unexplained electronics fault combined with an unrelated, ordinary light in the sky could have been merged into a single narrative after the fact, especially once the men were separated, questioned, and told never to speak of it. That is a real possibility, and it deserves to sit next to every other theory in this video, not below it. But that explanation has to survive the same test as every other theory here. It has to account for 2 separate flights, 1 week apart, guards who never spoke to one another, and a specific, consistent description of a glowing red object, arriving in the same narrow window, as a failure that Boeing's own engineers could not reproduce without physically interfering with the hardware. As of tonight, no single explanation, official or unofficial, has managed to clear that bar completely. Now I want to hear from you. Which theory do you believe actually explains this? Drop it below. I read every single one of them. We set a goal of 50 likes today. If we crossed it, that is your support driving this channel forward. If we have not crossed it yet, this is your moment to help us get there. Next time, we go even deeper. A different base, a different decade, and a declassified file that stayed sealed for almost 50 years before anyone outside the military ever saw a single page of it. Subscribe so you do not miss it. I will see you in the dark.